position. They hit everybody. Man to go down. And a Japanese fighter came up underneath because he called out. And that's when there was quite a few chutes that got out, slid out of his chute. He must not have had his chest strap fastened because he slid right. Our number 2 man, and then they got us, Ranger 2 on the first pass, because I heard the pilot tell the co-pilot, he says, Ed, you'll have to grab the stick, he says, because I'm hitting the chest, and I can't do nothing. And Edward said, I can't help you. He says, I've been hitting the head and I can't see. And the airplane slid off on this left wing again. And I couldn't contact nobody up in front of the airplane. I couldn't contact nobody in the back CFC section. It was burning real bad. And I got down and looked through the airplane, the window, to look up towards the CFC section, and the airplane was burning inside. I was hit in the head and in the back. I went back in my seat, had the sight shot out of my hand, the Selson. I was hit in the back, and I knew that if I didn't get out of that airplane, it was going to blow up. So I opened the window up, and I tried to crawl out. I took my chute, and I snapped it on, tried to crawl out, and I couldn't get out. I was a pretty big man, about the same size I am now. So I unhooked the left side of my parachute pack, and I pushed myself out the window like this, and this side was hanging on one strap, and I stood up on my seat and I pushed myself out the airplane window, and I got out on the wing fairing, and I took my parachute and snapped it back, and I was sitting on the outside, sitting halfway out on the vertical stabilizer, and I kept pushing myself out of the airplane, and my flight boot got caught in the window cleat, and the slipstream pushed me back, and I was still hanging there, hanging down the airplane like this. I kept pushing like this, and my boot slipped off my shoe, and I went free falling. And that was, I think we was flying, they brought us down to about 27, 28,000 feet. You know, normally we was flying at 30,000. Yeah, 30, 32,000. They brought us down.
We were together.
Yeah, same day. We went down same day. And
Same plane?
no, not same plane. Same mission. I went free falling down through the air, and I knew the airplane was going to blow up, so I delayed. I didn't open my parachute, and I was still tumbling when it blew up. I heard it blow up, and I straightened myself up like this, and I quit tumbling, and I stepped like this, and I looked up and I could see the debris falling. So I delayed my jump. I tried to drop. I dropped at least 10,000 feet before I ever opened my parachute out. I seen Mount Fujiyama sticking above the last layer of clouds, between layers of cloud, and I opened my parachute. And on the way down, some Japanese fighter made about 3 passes at me. He kept coming through, and I could see the fire coming off his wings, and I kept swinging the parachute back and forth to make myself hard to hit. And at one time, I didn't hear no air going through the pilot chute. And normally you get a zip, 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 zip sound like that. And here my parachute was starting to candle, was folding up. And I grabbed a hold of the shrouds and started shaking them, and it finally filled up again. And I said, well, hell with it. I'm not going to kill myself. If he kills me, all right, but I'm not going to kill myself. And that guy, after 3 passes, made another pass and come around, and I thought, holy hell, he's going to cut my legs off. He'd run out of ammunition or something. And he went by me, and I pulled my pistol out, and I was going to shoot at him with it. That's how close he was. I said, if I miss this guy, he'll cut my legs off. And I put it back in my bag. He turned around, made another swing around, and when he went by me, he saluted me like that. I'll never forget that as long as I live. He was so close to me, I honestly thought I could take that pistol and shoot him out of the air. But that's the way it was.
And how many of you out of 11 survived that day?
I was the only one that got out, I thought, because I was free falling when it blew up. But I found out later on that my radar man, that flew on our crew, he got out also. But he does remember bailing out. The only thing he remembers, he was trying to give one of our gunners some blood plasma. And the next thing he remembers, 2 Japanese fishermen was pulling him in a boat. So there was 2 of us get out of 11 men. And I was captured right away. I landed right in a group of civilians that was standing out from Tokyo, out of the bombing area. And I told you last night I went through a frozen rice paddy, you know.
Please talk about more.
Yeah.
Because we don't have it on the record.
I went through this frozen rice paddy. I landed, and I guess it was only about this deep because I went in through it, went through the ice, and my chute was still full of air, you know, and it was blowing with the wind. And I grabbed a hold of the bottom shroud lines and spilled all the air out of my chute. So when I stopped, I had mud all over me and everything. And I took the chute and wiped my face off, and then I noticed there was blood on the parachute. I had my mask on, and I had my goggles over that, but I was bleeding someplace down here. So when I noticed that blood on the chute, and I finished wiping myself off, I slid my helmet back like this and stuck my hand up here, took my mask off, and I was hit over the eye up here, left eye. But I was captured immediately. But the civilians was all around me, and they was coming at me, and I pulled my gun out and went like this and tried to hold them at bay. I never put a shell in the chamber because I knew if I'd fire one shot, that it tore me apart. And there was a Japanese farmer standing there. At least he was dressed like a farmer, and he had a double-barrel shotgun, and he was aiming at me. And why he never shot me, I don't know, but I kept going like this and kept myself moving and going like this, you know, to keep them getting around me. And here comes a Japanese soldier up on a horse, and he was riding on the berm. He got off that, and he pulled that big knife he carried, that samurai knife, sword, and he come up to me like this and went like that. And I know he was a soldier, and they said if you surrender to anybody, surrender to a soldier. And he held his hand out like this, and I give him my pistol. And then he really protected me from the civilians, because he was kicking them out of the way and hitting them with that, slapping them with that sword. And they got up on the berm, and 2 more soldiers come up, and I don't really believe they were soldiers. I think they were like home guards. They had blue denim uniforms on with Japanese markings on, and I think they were like home guard. And then they got me and tied me up and walked me out of there.
How did your plane go down?
I was hit by fighters also. It was the Japanese Tony, I think we called the Tony. It was a nice fighter aircraft. I was flying at 33,000 feet, and I was leading the mission, so we were right in #1 position. And the fighters came in, they were coming in head on, and they coming so fast, we never even really saw this first guy that came in on us because our bombardier has control at that time. We'd already been over the bomb run. We had dropped our bombs on the Nagashiko aircraft engine factory just outside of Tokyo. Probably missed it, but anyway, we we thought we tried to hit it. And the first plane came in, and it just like that and dove out underneath us. And the very first plane that came in hit our gas tanks on my right wing. And so my radio man, or one of my scanners, one of the gunners in the back of the plane called up and said, we're losing a lot of gas out of the wing. So I thought, uh-oh, that means we're not going to get back to Saipan tonight. But then I thought, well, I told the radio guy, well, let's start sending out the distress call to get this. We had 3 submarines spotted between Saipan and Japan, about 500 miles apart, and so there's a lot of ocean out there. And so we'll try to get out and ditch as close to a sub as we can. But then the planes are following in on these headland passes, and subsequently I got a couple of engines shot out, and lost my electrical power. The wheels fell down, which is fortunate because we bail out of the nose wheel well in the front of the airplane, and the wheel automatically came down. But then we were on fire also, and it just was no doubt about the fact that we had to get out of the airplane. But my communications was all shot up, and so I could not call anybody in the rear of the airplane to tell them to bail out. We had a little emergency bell on the pilot's pedestal there that you hit that an alarm bell, and it's an alarm to get out. That didn't work. So, but it was obvious that we were burning from front to back, and so people started bailing out anyway. And I had 12 people aboard my airplane. I had a wing staff man that was riding with me, plus my group commander. And of the 12 people, 9, I believe, got on the ground. I never saw but 5, to my knowledge. But piecing it together, I think 9 on the ground. But like Shine, we're at 33,000, and things are kind of chaotic, at that time, kind of a stressful situation. And so I'm not sure the proper sequence of everything, but I remember when I went out, I could see the fire back around my navigator table, which is back of the pilot section. And the fire was raging, and I had a feeling that my navigator was trying to tell me something. Now, Benny Edwards, I don't know if you knew Ben Edwards, but yeah, I think you did. And but then the smoke, kind of a greasy, smoky fire and hot, and my flying suit was on fire, so I had to get out of the seat. My little bombardier was right in front of me, and some way I couldn't get him to move very fast, and so I pulled him back to the escape hatch, and we tumbled out. But I also had made another mistake because I had not hooked up my little oxygen cylinder, which gives you about 3 minutes of oxygen once you leave the airplane. At 33,000, you don't live just as long as you're breathless. And so, like Shine, I fell free for about 15,000 feet till I get down where I could breathe. And after I opened the chute, then I noticed that all the skin in my hands was hanging down below my fingertips. It wasn't a deep burn, but it just scorched the skin off, and I hadn't felt a thing going out through the fire, although it was awfully hot because my suit was on fire. But when I got the chute open, I looked down below my finger, just pieces of skin were hanging down. And but it didn't feel anything. It didn't hurt. I was too excited. But then when I got on the ground, I didn't know what to do. Knew I wasn't going home. I had 2 thoughts in mind. One, I'm going to hit for the mountains in Japan and hide. I'll get a cave and I'll hide. And then the next thing, I'll make down to Tokyo Bay, because I was just on the outskirts of main city Tokyo, and I'm going to steal a ship, and I'm going to escape. Well, it was all wishful thinking because there's no place to go. And right away, a crowd of civilians gathered. Of course, you'd see a parachute coming down like this for quite a ways up there, and they had crowded around, and like Shine, I had my 45, and I kept it in there, but coming down the other way in the road was a group of soldiers headed by a sergeant, and about 20 of them. And so I got my 45, and I pointed it at this sergeant coming down. All he had, no weapons other than his samurai sword, and he was waving that, but I'll give him credit. He never slowed down. I had that 45, 45 looks pretty big if you're looking down the barrel. And he didn't miss one step. He just came on. Well, like Shine, I knew if I'd pulled the trigger, I was a dead man. I thought I was going to be a dead man anyway, but I just couldn't pull the trigger, so I put it back in. And they came on down, of course, and took my gun. And the civilians all around were quite angry. And the soldiers tied me up with ropes and put on a blindfold, and then turned me over to the civilians. And they gave me a good beating for a while. And my blindfold came off, so I could kind of see what was happening. But the the women were the worst. The men all had a club of some sort, or rakes and hoes, had been working around the garden, and they were trying to hit me. But the crazy women would jab, you know. And one little old lady, I'll never forget her if I live to be 310. She was dancing around outside the circle with some kind of a sharp stick in her hand and trying to get a place where she'd jab me. And she'd first jab up from my face, and I'd kind of cover my face, and she'd get a little lower, and I'd cover up, you know. She kept jabbing and jabbing and jabbing. There were so many of them wanting to hit me that they never got a good swing at all. Well, then pretty soon, and I didn't feel much, the adrenaline and everything. And so the soldiers then finally broke it up, and they marched me down the road a ways, put me in a clearing, and blindfolded and tied up. And the big crowd around, they were having a ball. You could hear them shouting and laughing, and one little guy was evidently a clown of the group. He'd say something, and everybody'd shout and whoop and holler and have a good time. Then somebody had a rope with a knot on it, and he'd come up and beat me on the head with that knotted rope every few minutes. But that was my first night in Japan. The soldiers finally put me in a truck and hauled me on down to the Kempitai headquarters down in Tokyo, where we all ended up that night. And so that was my welcome. And I was put in a cell that night with a Japanese man in there, and I thought, uh-oh, this is a setup. As soon as I go to sleep in this, a bare cell, you know, there was nothing, another thing in there, but they gave me a blanket to wrap in. And just as soon as I go to sleep, this guy's going to kill me. So I tried to stay awake all night and keep my eye on him, but he was afraid of me too, I think, because he was staying awake all night keeping an eye on me. So by morning, well, we were both pretty sleepy, but not having slept any. But so that started our great tour. My hands did not hurt very much, but they got badly infected in the next few weeks. And gangrene set in, and I thought, oh boy, I'm going to lose these hands. And I'd go in my interrogations, and they were such a mess. They're just all blistered and pus running all the time. And by George, the camp commander there, or I don't know, anyway, one of the authorities, got a doctor in there. It's the only time that we hardly ever saw a doctor at all on my stay in Japan, but he came and he had a nurse with him, and they took the tweezers and they ripped all this dead skin off and opened it down to the good flesh. And the doctor was very, very careful. And this nurse, oh, she hated me with a passion. She just looked at me, and if looks could kill, I'd have had it. And she would jab that tweezers in the back of my hand, you know, and just rip everything, good skin and bad skin and everything. And oh boy, it hurt. And the doctor called her down, really gave her a talking to. So she got pretty gentle then. Oh, she did hate me, which I don't blame her. I'd been bombing her homeland. And then they put a little disinfectant of some sort, kind of a red liquid, and put some bandages on it. And by George, they healed. It was so cold. We were in these cells down in the Kempitai military prison, and we had no heat, and it was a very, very cold winter. And so I took the bandages and tore them in strips so I could tie them around my cuffs of my flying suit and around my legs to try to keep the cold air out. And so that helped, but they did. Remember out the prison camp, 5 months later, my hands were quite a fiery red. But you see, in 45, 47 years, things heal. But that was my introduction to Japan.
Well, yesterday, Shine was talking about the one example of the guard brutality, abuse, so to speak, that couldn't say, kioske or something. And could you tell us about that? Maybe you can, show us how it happened.
Well, they used to come in our cells and beat us. They'd come in the cell. See, they made us kneel down like this all day long. Now, I can't sit like that, but that's the way we sat in our cells. And you couldn't move. And they'd come in there, and that guy would, this one Japanese soldier would take his bayonet and jab me in the ankles. Just stab me in the ankles. And he'd take the butt and hit me in the head or in the nose. Oh, he was pretty bad. He'd come in that cell about 2 or 3 times when he was on duty. I grabbed the bayonet out of his hand one time, and I damn near stabbed him with it, but I know I'd be in trouble then. I give it back to him. I was bigger than he was, and I was stronger. I'd only been down there at that time probably 3 days. But they weren't all that bad. There was just 2 or 3 of them that used to come in and give us a hard time. But the majority of them was pretty good. They'd come in and try to talk to you. Some could speak a little English. When we was transferred from the Kempe Tai 1 up to 2, where Goldie and I and another prisoner of war ended up, they also put a Japanese civilian in the same cell that I was in. And what he was doing was trying to pump me for information. And listen, Goldie and I used to talk, and it took us not too long to realize that we were being beaten for the things that we was saying. He was telling them what he and I was talking about. So he was in there pumping us for information. So we quit talking when he was in the cell. And they finally moved him out then.
Whatever comes to your mind,
Yeah.
tell us,
Was that the Bioki story you were talking?
Yeah.
Oh,
the Bioki, the zipper story?
That's you can get animated on.
Well, Hap couldn't speak no Japanese. And when they shot us down, they took our belts off of our clothes and the zippers off of our flight jackets. And Hap didn't have one in his either, so when he put his jacket on, we were standing in these Tico formations. The front row sat down like this, and the back row knelt down. And when the officer would come in to inspect us for this Tico, whoever the commanding American officer was would holler, "Genzai, Sajulokome, Jugo Nush," which means, "Sir, 36 men present, absent none." And he'd say bungo and count off. And would count ichi, ni, star, si, go, locus, ichi, hachiku, on down the line. And when he got to the end man either said mum or gets, which meant odd or even, and then they either subtracted a man or added the 2 figures. But anyway, so when he come down inspecting us, he walked down the line. When he got in front of Hap, he says, "Bagiro, Nero," and he says, what you, and Hap said what we taught him, to say this zipper is broke or sick. We said, all you have to do is say, "Be okay, be okay." Say, "Be okay," only say faster. Be okay. So Hap remembered this, so when the officer asked him how come he wasn't zipped up, Hap said, "Be okay." And this officer could understand English. He said, "Be okay," and he, pow, give him a couple of karate chops. course, we laughed at that after he left, but Hap didn't think that was very funny.
But that's where a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, because Bioki being sick, and the only thing we think of the broken zipper, it's sick, and every time Hap would say, Bioki, pow, B-O-K-9. So it, we weren't getting hip shine, so it was funny.
Oh, that helped. You have to have a certain amount of humor to live through something like that. It's such a terrific shock that you're going through, and the tremor of the thing, that you have to keep your sanity, and you have to have a certain amount of humor to look at this thing to get through it. And that's what we did. We learned to live with it. And by God, we all made it. We never lost a man there due to stress. We lost one flyer in a cell, Brugge.
Brugge was on my airplane.
Yeah, he was in two down.
Yeah, they beat and starved him to death, but he only lasted about 2 months after being.
He died in there, but we don't think it was from a physical condition. We think it was mental, the strain.
I was with him in his final weeks, and all this, you could see him cracking every now and then.
There was times when he was rational, but he used to say, I'm 30-some years old, I got a wife and 2 kids, and
But every night
I
he
know
saw his wife and 2 kids going off the road and being killed.
Yeah.
Then he wanted a piece of pencil and a paper.
Yeah, give me a pencil piece, that's right. I remember him saying.
Well, he whispered through the wall to me once before we went out that next prison. And he says, will you do me a favor? We weren't allowed to talk to each other when we were in there, but we did, obviously. If the guard was down at the end of the cell block someplace, we'd whisper. And so Brugge, he was a little too far gone, really, to hold his voice down. And he asked me, he says, do me a favor. He says, would you tell my wife to take out a separate insurance policy? And I said, well, sure, I'll tell her, but why don't you tell her? And he says, no, they won't let me tell her, but they'll let you tell her, and just tell her, she'll know what to do about it, just tell her to take out a separate insurance policy. So he was, his mind was wandering quite a bit, and he was a West Pointer, a guy in great health, and he just about 2 months.
But he gave up.
Yeah.
He gave up. He said, I'll never make it back. And once you surrender to yourself, you're not going to make it. You can't give up. You got to fight. No, that's. Of course, everybody doesn't have ice water flowing through their veins. Everybody has to have something to make him want to live. You can't give up. I had a wife, and my wife was pregnant when I went overseas, and that was the incentive, I think, that kept me going. I wanted to get back.
None of our families were ever notified because we were special prisoners. We were war criminals, if you know that. So my wife was never notified. Haps was never notified. Your family is never notified. In fact, they told me when I was in the solitary confinement, they came in and said that they'd heard through the Red Cross my wife had been killed in an automobile accident. And so, but they also told me one time that Deanna Durbin, and no one now ever, you fellas never heard of Deanna Durbin, but that Deanna Durbin, she was a movie star like Judy Garland in those days, and that she'd been killed in an automobile accident. Then they got me out one day and had a big story how a Japanese fighter pilot knocked down a B-12.
Said, Ohio, Olinto, Ohio, you son of a bitch. And Hap would say, I'm from Cincinnati. And that happened for several mornings till I found out that he was really from Cincinnati, Ohio. I wasn't. And the other thing that was funny was when they'd come in and they'd ask us, they'd say, Sami. I didn't know what Sami was. And later on I found out Sami meant cold. And you'd say, Sami, cold. He'd say, nah, Sami kanai, taiso. So he'd make us stand up to exercise.